You didn't raise your hand when I asked.
I wasn't looking at it.
Can you closer over here? There's so much room here. I don't want to turn around all the way every single time. Cool. So we're using the better Google Slides thing, the one that everyone else should be using for this next quarter. Yeah, anyways, so this is a workshop on how to make a good puzzle game or puzzle, whichever one you would prefer. So the first big question is, what is a puzzle? And since you guys probably have played puzzle games before in your life, what do you think is the definition of a puzzle?
I have no idea.
If I were to guess, it's like when you're given a problem and then you have to find a solution. That would be like the most general puzzle.
That you could define a puzzle that way, yes. The dictionary definition of a puzzle is a game, toy, or problem designed to test ingenuity or knowledge. If we're going specifically in games, though, it's not a toy because don't give me a toy. But specifically, it's a challenge. That it's unlike most other video games. There's one specific dominant strategy towards victory. Usually in most other game genres, that's a bad thing because you want the player to have options, as only having one dominant strategy reduces choice. But for a puzzle game, that has to be there, or it usually has to be there. In order to beat the puzzle, the player has to find the strategy. Whereas most games, you want to win. Most games, the goal of the game is to win, whereas the goal of the puzzle game is to solve this puzzle, find this dominant strategy. So it's a problem that forces the player to stop and think about what they are doing and how to proceed. So, what makes a puzzle good? Do any of you guys have any puzzles that you like a lot?
There's this game, what it's called, it's on my Steam, I can go look at it. But it's not the most complex of puzzles, it's fairly simple, but it's designed, Zynga is its name? No, Z-E-N-G-A, or Zing, Z-E-N-G-E.
Isn't Zynga the company that makes?
I think it's something else.
And basically it's a bunch of very nice colors and some cool pictures, and then a little bit of square-based puzzles. I don't remember exactly how it's played, but it's a fairly simplistic. It's not very difficult to do it, but it's got like nice music and stuff to go alongside of it, and so it's very relaxing and intuitive watching. And then there's this other puzzle game I like to play called Metro something, and basically you're in charge of a subway system in a city, and you've got rivers and other stuff, and then the complexity of the puzzle increases and increases and increases, and then eventually it just collapses in on itself, and that's a very stressful situation, but it's nice to see how long you can go.
So it's like a roguelike as well?
Huh? Yeah. What is that one?
I guess it's my turn. So, I mean,
Mini Metro.
The first example that comes to mind was when I played the old Pokemon games, when they had the gyms. I believe like a lot of those gyms had like their own mini puzzles to solve. Now, whether I can say they're objectively good or not is kind of debatable because it was kind of confusing to solve as a kid, but there were patterns that you could recognize when going through them, and they are solvable through trial and error, so you could argue that it is good in that regard, but that's just an example that first came into my mind when I was thinking of this question.
Right. Well, keep those games in your heads and I'm gonna go over some things that make some puzzles good. Not every good puzzle does all these things, but a good puzzle usually has at least one of them. So first things first, it should be fun. The biggest thing about a good puzzle is that a good puzzle is fun to do. So something that makes a puzzle fun is the learning process for the player. As the player is playing the puzzle or the puzzle game, they are learning something about something else, like either the setting of the world. They're learning about like mechanics, how to think, thinking outside the box, stuff like that. So a puzzle should hand out new ideas for the player, for them to mess around with, and for them to figure out how to solve the overarching problem. A good thing about Brave, for example, has this. This is in like the very first sequence, where you're told to jump on that enemy right there, then you can kill the enemy, and then once jumping on it, realize, hey, after bouncing off this guy, I bounce higher on the rebound. So then there's a puzzle piece that you have to go collect, but it's out of reach of your normal jump height. So you realize that, hey, if I jump on this enemy, then I can bounce higher to get that puzzle piece. And then right after that, it's the same puzzle except add one more enemy there. In the puzzle's a bit higher, so you realize, oh, I have to bounce twice, and each successive bounce will increase my height further. This is further messed around with in this area of the game, where you have to get from one side of there to the other. And there's one more mechanic that is added to the game, which is the rewind button, in which you then realize, like, oh, cool, there's a little bit more I can play around with, and there's a little bit more that I learn, and now I know what I need to do in order to get to the other side. So this person eventually figures it out. Where they bounce off of. Keyword is eventually. But let's not stick to that. So there's also a loop of mastery that occurs, which is specifically what Bray was talking about. Whereas at first first there's this sense of fear that the player has, where they don't know whether or not they can actually complete a challenge that they have, complete the puzzle that's set up in front of them. Then there is surprise when they're discovering a solution, where they just go through the thinking process of trying to figure out how to solve the problem. And then there's the happiness and the fun of learning, where you have understood the problem and you have mastered the solution to the puzzle. In this case, once you learn that, you have quote-unquote mastered the puzzle. So a lot of things that make the puzzle good. You want to work with the puzzle wants to work with the player to reach the solution. So the puzzle should teach it should teach the player how to solve itself. So as you're playing, it teaches you like mechanics. It tries to subtly like point you in the right direction, so you're not just wandering around the entire time, figuring out what you're doing, and then just basically bashing your head against the wall. So if you were able to do this well, you can give the player a sense of accomplishment, because then they're like, oh cool, I figured out how to do something without anyone telling me how to do, when in reality you actually did tell them how to do it, they just didn't realize. Elegance and minimalism. This goes with that game, the color game. Zanga.
Yeah,
Zenge, whatever. Where the puzzle should be elegant or minimal, where there's not a lot of distractions. This is sort of something like the talk that we had at GDW last night. He also talked about this in level design, and it's sort of similar to puzzle design, in the sense that you should focus on one or two things. You shouldn't focus on too many things to distract the player. So like one mechanic or one or two mechanics, something that you're trying to teach, but not a lot. So you want to focus parts of the puzzle, like the focus of the puzzle. You want to focus on that. I just realized I wrote that weird. And then everything else, anything else outside of that will distract from the experience. The player will find it hard to figure out what they are trying to do. Fez is an example of how not to do minimalism, because that requires a whole level of meta, and you have to use resources that are not found within the game. Like, for example, there's a QR reader that you need to do in some levels. There's also a bunch of online stuff, and there's also a puzzle where you have to go through the audio files or something like that. So it's not things you'll find in the game, and as a result, this game is confusing as hell. So, what are some parts of the components of a puzzle? Do any of you guys have any idea of what puzzle components are, or what components a puzzle might have?
Well, I mean, it presents itself in front of the player. So I'm guessing that whole thing about teaching them without realizing they teach them is kind of just like putting the puzzle in front of them and just seeing how the players like go through it, and the player should be learning about that.
That's part of a good puzzle,
Yeah.
but this is something that all puzzles have.
All puzzles.
I would think a puzzle is made up of pieces and holes, pieces in a very vague sense, so it's like solutions and problems.
Specifically, the way the definition, or the words I'm using are keys and locks, or locks and keys. So, the basis for every single puzzle game is that there's this lock that the player has to open, and they have to find the key that goes into this lock. Well, so the key and the lock, the key can be something as simple as an item. It can be more difficult, like a mechanic, or even then, even some sort of knowledge that one has, like how specific mechanics interact with each other, etc. And then the lock is the puzzle, where basically they have to use this key to open the puzzle. Like they have to use this key to solve the puzzle and open the lock. This is from Super Metroid. It is probably the simplest form of lock and key, or one of the simplest forms of lock and key, where there's this green door that you can't open normally by shooting it. So you have to find the super missile shooter, so you can shoot a super missile into the door to open it. So in this case, the key is an item that you have to find, and the lock would be the door.
It would seem reasonable that most good puzzles are either fairly easy to see that you can't solve them yet, or you have all the pieces or keys necessary to solve them.
That's part of the general tips that I have a little bit later. Give clear feedback. If a player is doing something wrong, you gotta let them know that they're doing it wrong. For example, in Laura, what's the game? Tomb Raider? In one of the newer Tomb Raiders, there's this puzzle where there's an elevator that you pull up in the air, and the problem is as soon as you try to get close to it, you have to go around this winding path, and by the time you get to the path, it falls down. Now, if the way the designers designed it made it so that the elevator fell down within like a certain distance of your player, the player could think that, oh, cool, if I'm just a little bit faster, I can make it. So then they will try again and again with the hope just going in the completely wrong direction. However, if you made it so that the elevator fell far away enough to the point where the player was like, oh, there's no way I can make it in time, then they realize, I'm going the wrong way, I should try a different method of attack. So that is so locks and back to locks and keys. So locks and keys are the very basis of what a puzzle is. Like they're the like every single puzzle has these. And now in order for a puzzle to expand, because a puzzle is not just a lock and key, because that would be boring, right? So there are difficulty dials, or things you can mess around with in order to increase the difficulty of the game. You can increase the steps that requires to solve it. You can add new mechanics, new information. You can use new ways of using existing mechanics or information that you have in the game. You can have multiple solutions to a puzzle, which does go against what I said earlier about puzzles like simply has one dominant strategy. Well, puzzle still technically has a dominant strategy. However, if you have multiple solutions, one solution can be less effective than the other, or it would take a long amount of time. I don't exactly remember if it might be EA or a different company. I know that they have like a specific steps of what they can do to change the difficulty, increase the difficulty or decrease the difficulty of a puzzle. Something along the lines of like add more steps. You can give like some sort of information or mechanic much earlier than when the lock actually comes up, so the player has a chance of forgetting the thing and they have to make this connection. You can add more complications. You can like increase the mechanic count or something like that, or the ways you have to think about the mechanic. So increasing those would just make it more difficult to solve. Whereas if you increase the number of solutions, reduce the length of the puzzle, stuff like that, the puzzle becomes easier for the player to solve. Again, so general tips. Most of these general tips are about visibility. You need the player to know what the lock and the key is, otherwise they might not even realize that there is a puzzle. And that's counterintuitive to making a good puzzle. Giving clear feedback, we already talked about that. Try to avoid resetting the player. I know sometimes this doesn't exactly work out, because there's sometimes you want to reset a player, but it can be very frustrating for a player if they figure out a puzzle, and the puzzle's a skill check. For example, in Legend of Zelda games, in Wind Waker there's one specific dungeon where you can figure out the puzzle, but if you can't make the skill checks, you will continuously have to restart the level, restart the dungeon, and it can be very infuriating. You can try chunking if you feel like your puzzle is too difficult, if player feedback says that, hey, I have no idea how to solve this problem, and the reason for that might be because you have too many small parts of the puzzle. You can try to put all those parts, try to fuse them together into a bigger chunk, so it's easier for the player to understand and comprehend and to remember when they're trying to solve this puzzle. Use context if it is applicable to your game. If it's a simple puzzle game without much story, this doesn't really apply as well. However, if you have a game like The Walking Dead, there are several. You can use if you have a game like Walking Dead, you can use the expectations and context of the world to kind of guess what the players are going to do, or try to use those to lead the player into the correct solution of a puzzle. For example, in one scene, you're going to investigate a car, and then you see a zombie. The player's first reaction would be to shoot the thing because it's going to bite them and hurt them, instead of something like, I want to search to see what's in its pockets. It's only after they kill the thing that they really think about doing anything else. Okay, so let's make a puzzle.
I actually have a question about a previous slide,
Yes.
real quick. So when we were thinking about the puzzles in our head,
Yes.
in the beginning, and I was kind of looking at the lock and key, and how my example was Pokemon,
Yeah.
and how the player's movement is kind of like how you solve some of those puzzles. You don't really grab items or do skill checks. It's just kind of like a pattern
That would
of
be
movement.
knowledge.
So that was just knowledge.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
The knowledge of, cool, I have to move this way in order to get it. For example, the invisible maze, Kogo's invisible maze.
Yes, that.
So the knowledge then is, the key would then be, okay, cool, this is the path I have to take in order to get through this maze.
And the ice puzzles in my head are kind of you have to move in a specific
Yes.
line in order to
I'm pretty sure that none of those puzzles have multiple solutions. There's always only
it's
one
usually
way
just
to
one.
solve. So if you were to make that easier, you could make it so
I can't remember where I played the Invisible Maze one. Because there was one of them.
It's
I
kind of
don't
Red?
remember. Right, it was on one version or another with the invisible, on the screen that I was playing. You could tell the difference between the tiles that were the invisible and not invisible. And I played it before when I was younger, and I was like, oh, this is impossible. And I played it again, and I actually paid attention to the tiles, and I could actually see where stuff was.
That would be along lines of, where is it? I actually don't know if I wrote that there, but it would be sort of the working with the player to solve the puzzle. It's a hint. I wouldn't say that's a good hint. It's kind of a shitty hint because it straight up tells you what the answer is, but it's a hint. Cool, so let's try to make a puzzle. I should have put the questions tab in. So, I didn't grab paper, but I will grab paper. So what I want you guys to do is specifically choose one major mechanic that you want to work with in this puzzle that you're thinking of. For example, mirrors, lighted mirrors, some of the things. And then just draw a little possibility of what a puzzle that you could make out of.
Also, we have freedom of what we're doing here.
Yes.
It's not we're constricted to using certain things or other than just a one mechanic.
yeah, just choose 1 or 2 mechanics and play around with it and see what you can make. Try to incorporate some things that you've learned from this workshop. We're using the textureless paper because I forgot to grab graph paper. And if you want to look at some other previous slides, feel free to do that. Or feel free to ask me to do that. One tip I could give you guys is that while making this puzzle, don't think of it in the way that the player would learn the information. Don't think of the way like use the information that you know. Which is why Sherlock Holmes, like Sherlock Holmes movies, is not really. You're not going to solve the puzzle that they give with the information that you have, because Sherlock Holmes knows more information than you ever will about the setting of the world, or not the setting of the world, but like the details of the characters.
Do we have to like, should we draw out our solution or do we explain the solutions?
Don't draw out the solution. Okay. Just have it.
Anything else I need to do?
Hi. Is this workshop?
Each other.
When's this workshop?
Puzzles.
It's puzzles. Yeah.
Puzzles.
When is it? Did it already pass?
Well, like.
Oh, never mind.
Over.
Never mind.
I mean, it was short. We still have like half an hour to do things closer. Go over things again.
I just got out of class, and actually what I just did is I was in the 3D printing lab because I made like a little 3D anteater, and I'm having it 3D printed.
Oh, I remember
we had something similar here. Weird.
I think I saw
Oh,
it
the-
over
here.
on this side. I know what you're talking about. Though. Yeah, it's so cool. Yeah.
Okay, so let's see. So you need 2 batteries to open up the door, right? Okay, so there's a battery in
It's
here.
convenient that the fingerprint spot is right here. It's Hotel Red.
Oh, I kinda messed up. I was thinking the same. That's
What
fine.
kind of place Hotel Blue?
Oh yeah, have 2 versions, Hotel Red and
Yeah,
Hotel
Hotel
Blue.
Red, Hotel Blue.
No,
Just-
but
After 1 month, we released the 3rd game.
you just
Hotel Green.
completely color swap the entire game.
Yeah, exactly, and have all the text that says red say blue instead.
Yeah.
And then just have that be the difference.
And then like you can get different endings in these 2 games, but after 3 months you release another game.
And one of
like,
in Hotel
yeah,
Blue.
but and in Hotel Green you can get all the endings, so they need to buy that again.
In
Like,
Hotel
what-
Blue, it like rains. In Hotel Red, it rains blood. It already rains. But in Hotel Red, in Hotel Blue, whenever it's like raining normally, it's
That way
raining
they
blood.
can't sort of just like accidentally stumble upon the solution.
I see. So it's kind of like instead of
They have
doing
special
this,
characters.
it'd probably like make
Yeah.
like a little thing here,
Yeah.
and then that would open up.
Yes.
Should I look into the bathroom?
Okay.
Oh no, how about teaching that?
No, I love Craig Morris.
Yeah.
It's also to figure out yourself.
But people also like teaching class.
I don't do it.
That's gone now.
Shit, it looks like USB stick in that lab.
Oh no,
Oh,
I need to
no.
go back to the lab. Fix it.
I mean, I could just get it
I got a
back when I
battery
figure it
right
out.
there.
Shadows
So
are everywhere
right here.
It's not black one, by the way.
There's no holes on my
Huh?
It's
side.
not black.
Yeah, so I'm gonna walk over here, grab the battery, put it into the remote, change the channel. Ron, if you see.
I would like open the thing next to
Huh?
it.
See
I'm
what?
gonna go check in there, which I was fine, showing you that.
Wait,
And I'm gonna take both batteries,
Yeah, how much do
put
you
them in
have?
there, and then I'll open the door.
Cool, so now the next step is to build upon these mechanics. So what you can do is,
You wanna look at mine?
yeah, sure.
Here, yours.
Where you can then.
So-
Does your team want to go another quarter with this?
If you want, you can start working.
So you're gonna work on it during the summer, or you're gonna wait till fall to start working on it
If you
again?
don't want to, just put it on.
Jeez.
Oh.
Is that?
That was Megan. Open the door. She's carrying stuff.
Hi.
Hi.
Oh, that's from.
Things.
Oh, you.
Was
The
that-
fucking ICS day just ended.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just- Oh,
So-
no.
Basically, you can remove
Well,
this.
that's when.
It's not
I'm
working, so it
not
doesn't
explaining it,
work.
I'm telling you what rules you
That
have.
was the second
You
ICS day.
can move this guy
It's the third
in
ICS day.
Third ICS.
four
Wait,
directions,
wait.
limited by
Was there really
gravity.
3 days? I thought there was only 3 days Wednesday.
I don't know.
Yeah.
there
Or
was no Wednesday.
connections.
Oh, all right, then
Um,
yes, it
so
was
the
the
platform?
second one.
Or
It was
kind of
fine.
top down.
Where does this
so
go?
it's-
It goes here.
Doesn't really matter.
Wrong.
You
Out of
can-
my way.
You can't
I'm sorry.
move against an arrow, so when you're going with an arrow, you're heading
I
in
think
that
that's
direction and you're stacking in that direction.
I can't.
You can't move against
Is
it,
it?
Where does
but
it plug
you
in?
can move to the side
Power strip,
slightly.
plug it into.
It's hard to do, and you can increase your speed by moving with the arrow.
Okay.
I wish
So
someone
what's
was
the,
here.
where's the end
The end goal is.
You want to be incredibly lazy?
Ronnie,
I'm just
no!
kidding.
Well, let's see, first I'll go down here.
We're all
We'll
climb under the
go
fucking
down
table like some
here.
sort of animal.
And then I'm stuck here. And I can go here, this way.
Do you want me to do it?
No.
I did something wrong. Cool.
Just don't
I'm
wanna
gonna
do it.
restart my computer after Windows updates and see if
This one.
Can't
I'm
find
supposed
an
to go
outlet
down to here.
for Where is she?
And did,
So it's like,
Where's
the one who
Rachel?
took it out
and
the
I'm just
first
stuck
time?
here,
Not me.
and I can just push
Enticing
onward
to know
until I
where
get
it's
here,
supposed to
Yeah.
go.
and now I'm good.
person who took
So
it.
what are you trying to teach this level?
No, it was Louise.
I'm trying to teach that you can.
Louise, I think
The
Louise
thing.
was the one that brought it here.
So,
I remember.
basically, this one was supposed to go down, I didn't write it, this one was supposed to go down further.
So it's supposed to force the player to go this way.
Yeah, both of them were gonna go down further. and then
Wait, no,
What are all
look,
those
right
things
here.
plugging into?
But if you could make it through that thing,
Damn it.
oh no, push through
No, it's
in
right
time,
there.
Found
to
one?
give plenty of time,
On the
then you'd be able to go.
Yeah, that's
I
what
feel
it
like
is.
this is kind of scary in the
You
later
feed
levels
it
where
through
it
and all.
requires like
Wait,
extra
no, I
no
can't
way.
even see
Because
it.
like if
Yeah,
there's
it's
certain
fine, I
puzzles
can
where you
see
have to
it.
push forward, otherwise you just fail, then I can
Right.
see that be kind of like,
That-
if I'm unaware of that happening, it would just like reset me.
Got it.
So like, let's say there was a puzzle where
So-
instead of this being like a downward, and instead of this pushing backwards, this actually pushes forward,
Yeah.
but this
All
one
right,
pushes this way.
gentlemen, we've done
So
it.
if I go here and I don't realize I'm supposed to push through this,
Thank
I
you,
could end up
Wayne.
just
But
going back
history
here.
will remember this.
But if until I realize like I have to push through this thing, and it's hard, like you said, so it might be like at first I don't realize I can do it because it's kind of like slow.
Yeah, that's why I was trying to teach
Oh,
you
now
in
it
this
works.
one, where
Yeah.
you have to know that you can push through it.
Okay.
Okay, so now you have one mechanic and an application for this mechanic. Create another level in which you build on that application.
I think I have, but I forget it.
You can build on the application or the mechanic by adding new mechanics, showing other ways of using said mechanic.
Oh yeah, I did see this. It's really cool.
I improved the transition between clicking and that button.
That's the best one.
Multiple die. So many characters are there in the game.
Too many to count.
Yeah.
Well, right now there's exactly 2.
There will be characters that like you only speak to them once and they are the first one to die and they just die and you never see them after that.
What?
Usually in traditional horror games there are kind of
This
person
is
like
not a
that.
horror.
But
What?
it was
Oh man, I just realized looking at this pink thing for too long, guys. It's gonna be like.
Oh, yeah.
I want this fast.
Speed is a
Made a
little faster
mistake.
for bug purposes.
It's not sure.
She is not speedy.
This is when I have a shader.
She's not listening.
She's not comfortable wherever she is. She's nervously walking away from wherever.
Have you heard this music?
How am I? I don't know.
Who knows that?
yeah, where did you
Very
go?
atmospheric.
Rhyming?
Well,
Rami.
oh yeah, real
For-
quick.
For once, that's not a butchering of my name.
Real quick, these are some links that you guys can look at if you want like videos or readings
Granny.
topic. I also use them as sources, some sources. And with that, I think I'll just end the stream right there because everything else is just more you do it yourself.